Mr. Daniel? The name felt like a shard of glass in my mouth. Maya hadn't meant to say it, but there it was, hanging in the sterile air of the Gilded Compass, a five-star restaurant where secrets usually stayed buried beneath layers of truffle oil and hushed conversations. Adrian Petro, the titan Maya had just addressed, didn't just flinch. He looked as if she'd ripped open his chest. His eyes, cold as a winter sky, suddenly flickered with something raw. Terror? What she didn't know, couldn't possibly grasp, was that Daniel wasn't just a name. It was a ghost that would drag her into a battle for a legacy she never knew existed. Her kindness, her naive slip of the tongue, they have no idea what's coming. Mr. Daniel, the name felt like a shard of glass in my mouth. Maya hadn't meant to say it, but there it was, hanging in the sterile air of the Gilded Compass, a five-star restaurant where secrets usually stayed buried beneath layers of truffle oil and hushed conversations. Adrian Petro, the titan Maya had just addressed, didn't just flinch. He looked as if she'd ripped open his chest. His eyes, cold as a winter sky, suddenly flickered with something raw. Terror. What she didn't know, couldn't possibly grasp, was that Daniel wasn't just a name. It was a ghost that would drag her into a battle for a legacy she never knew existed. Her kindness, her naive slip of the tongue, they have no idea what's coming. The Gilded Compass hummed with the quiet, almost reverent energy of wealth. Every clink of crystal, every hushed conversation, every precisely plated morsel spoke of power and privilege. And at its heart, in a booth carved from imported marble and bathed in the soft glow of bespoke lighting, sat Adrian Petro. His presence commanded the space. He was a monument of tailored suits, expertly coiffed silver hair, and eyes that could dissect a balance sheet with a single glance. Tonight, he was dissecting Genevieve Dubois' latest proposal. Maya, a college student juggling art history studies with a waitressing job to support her ailing mother, navigated the polished floors like a tightrope walker. Each perfectly balanced tray was a victory against the ever-present fear of a dropped glass, a spilled drink, a mistake that could cost her the job she desperately needed. She approached the Petro table, her hands already slick with nervous sweat. Refilling water glasses was a simple task usually, but under Petro's gaze, everything felt monumental. As she reached for his glass, a tremor seized her hand. The glass slipped. It shattered on the marble with a sharp, echoing crack, sending shards and ice skittering across the floor. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby tables. The floor manager, his face a mask of practiced calm, descended like a hawk, his apologies already forming on his tongue. "Mr. Petro, I am so incredibly sorry." Maya knelt, her cheeks burning with humiliation. I am so sorry, sir. It slipped." She dared a glance upward into the icy blue depths of Petro's eyes. There was no warmth, only a chilling detachment. He waved a dismissive hand. "It's done. Clean it up." His voice was a low, clipped command, the voice of a man accustomed to immediate obedience. As she gathered the last of the glass, a melting ice cube slid against her skin, sending a shiver up her spine. Again she looked up. And that's when it happened. A jolt of something akin to recognition, or perhaps just familiarity, struck her. It was subtle, a fleeting impression in the stern set of his jaw, the intense focus in his gaze, something that tugged at the edges of her memory. He reminded her of the one faded photograph she kept of her father. A wave of nervous energy made her tongue thick. "My apologies again, Mr. Daniel," she blurted out, the name, her father's name, a constant bittersweet presence in her thoughts, escaped her lips before she could stop it. It hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. The manager froze mid-bow. Genevieve Dubois, who had been observing the scene with cool detachment, raised an eyebrow. But it was Adrian Petro whose reaction was most profound. The steely composure he usually wore like armor shattered. The color drained from his face, leaving him ashen. The pen slipped from his fingers, clattering against his plate. His eyes, moments before assessing million-dollar deals, were now wide, locked on Maya with an expression of pure, unfiltered shock. He looked not just surprised, but stricken. as if she had resurrected a ghost. The blood pounded in Maya's ears. The weight of her mistake crashed down on her. She had called him the wrong name, a name that clearly held some power over this powerful man. I'm so sorry, sir, she stammered, scrambling to her feet. I don't know why I said that. My father, his name was Daniel. I'm so sorry, Mr. Petro. But her apology didn't register. Adrian Petro was lost, adrift in a sea of resurfaced memories. The scent of solder and ozone from a cramped garage, the fervent gleam in another man's eyes, the crushing burden of a devastating choice. Get out, he rasped, his voice barely audible, directed not at Maya, but at the manager and his own executive. Sir? The manager stammered, bewildered. Now! The word ripped from his throat, a raw roar of thunder that made everyone within earshot jump. The manager scurried away, pulling a terrified Maya with him. Genevieve, her composure momentarily shaken, hesitated, her gaze darting between her boss's ashen face and the retreating form of the waitress. Then, with a curt nod, she gathered her things and left the booth. Adrian Petro was alone, slumped back against the plush leather, his hands trembling. That name, Daniel, a forgotten life. It wasn't just a name. It was the phantom limb of a dream they'd shared in a Silicon Valley garage, fueled by cheap coffee and the electric conviction that they were about to change the world. Daniel Rodriguez, his partner, his best friend, the genuine brilliance behind the core algorithm that now underpinned Ethelgard Innovations. Later that night, the city blurred outside his car windows. Adrian's voice was rough when Genevieve finally answered his call. I need you to do something for me. Off the books. Utmost discretion. Of course, Adrian. What is it? Genevieve's voice was professional, but laced with concern. She had never witnessed him lose control like that. The waitress at the Gilded Compass. Her name is Maya. He paused, the name feeling foreign and dangerous on his tongue. Maya Rodriguez. I want to know everything. Where she lives, where she studies, her family, her financial situation, her history, everything. I want a complete file on my desk by morning. Rodriguez, Genevieve repeated, a flicker of recognition in her tone. Don't ask questions, Genevieve. Just do it, he snapped, regretting the harshness immediately. Please, it's important. It will be done, she said softly, and the line went dead. Adrian leaned his head back against the cool leather, closing his eyes. The past wasn't buried. It had only been sleeping. He could feel it now, a cold hand reaching out from the grave and dragging him back into the darkness. The spirit did nothing to warm the ice that had formed in his chest. Meanwhile, across town, in a cramped but clean apartment, Maya Rodriguez was reliving her own nightmare. She recounted the evening's events to her mother, Maria, her voice shaking. And then I called him Daniel, Mama. I don't know what came over me. He looked like he was going to have a heart attack. I'm going to be fired. I know it. Maria paused her work of shelling peas, her face etched with the quiet weariness of a woman who had worked tirelessly her entire life. Mija, it was a mistake, a slip of the tongue. The way he looked at me, Maya shuddered. It was more than that. It was violent, like I'd struck him. Daniel Rodriguez was a ghost in their lives, a man of boundless warmth and ingenuity who had been taken from them 20 years ago. Maya was just 5 when he died, her memories fragmented snapshots, the scent of metal and rain from his workshop, the rough texture of his cheek against hers. Her mother often shared stories of his brilliance, of the groundbreaking data compression algorithm he was developing with his partner, poised on the brink of a breakthrough. Then came the accident. A single-car crash on a winding coastal road during a storm. The police report was simple. Lost control, no foul play. His partner, a young, ambitious man Maria couldn't quite recall, Adam or something like that, had delivered the news, devastated, she remembered. He'd paid for the funeral and then vanished, along with Daniel's research notes and prototypes, claiming it was necessary to preserve his legacy. They never saw a penny. I wish I knew more about him, Mama, Maya whispered, tracing the table's wood grain. About his work, about his partner. Maria sighed, a sound filled with old sorrow. It was a lifetime ago, Maya. Your father was a dreamer. His partner probably realized the dream was impossible without him. We had to move on. We had to survive. And now survival felt threatened again, all because of a single, inexplicable slip of the tongue. She had no idea that across the city, the man she had terrified was staring at an old digitized photograph on his monitor. Two young men grinning, arms around each other, standing before a garage with a hand-painted sign, DA Innovations, Daniel and Adrian. The file Genevieve had provided was comprehensive, and it felt like a blade twisting in Adrian's heart. He had stolen a future. Their future. The day after the incident, Maya braced herself for a pink slip. Days turned into weeks, and nothing happened. Then, a letter arrived at their apartment from the hospital. Her mother's overdue bill, nearly $10,000, had been paid in full by an anonymous donation. "Mama, look!" Maya cried, tears blurring her vision as she showed her mother the letter. Maria read it, her hand flying to her mouth. "Dios mío! A miracle!" A seed of suspicion sprouted in Maya's mind. Too convenient. It felt too much like a coincidence. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. This one from the dean's office. She had been selected as the recipient of the newly established Phoenix Legacy Scholarship for the Arts. A full ride, funded by a private philanthropist. This time, disbelief mingled with unease. It wasn't a miracle. It was an intervention. And she could only think of one person with the means and a possible motive to intervene so powerfully in her life. Adrian Petro, meanwhile, was watching from afar, his guilt manifesting as desperate attempts at restitution. "The scholarship has been accepted," Genevieve reported one afternoon in his office. "The mother's medical bills are cleared. I've also arranged for a top specialist to conveniently have an opening." Adrian stared out the window. "Is the girl okay?" "Her academic advisor says she's relieved but also confused," Genevieve replied carefully. "She knows this isn't random luck." "It's the best I can do," he said, his voice tight. "I can't approach her. What would I even say? Hello? I'm the man who built an empire on your father's stolen work while your family struggled to survive? Perhaps money isn't what she needs," Genevieve suggested softly. "Perhaps what she needs is the truth." Adrian's eyes flashed with a familiar, cold fire. The truth would destroy everything. The company, my entire life. It am giving her a future that is more valuable than some painful, pointless truth. He was protecting himself, not her. He knew he needed to see her again, not as a powerful billionaire in a restaurant, but as something else. He learned she spent her afternoons studying at the City Art Museum. He dressed down, leaving his entourage behind, and walked into the museum. He found her easily sitting on a bench in the sculpture garden. He watched her, a knot of something unidentifiable tightening in his stomach. She looked so much like Daniel when he was deep in thought. Taking a breath, he approached. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet. Maya looked up, startled, her eyes widening in immediate recognition. "Mr. Petro," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She started to gather her books. "Please don't go," he said quickly, holding up a hand. "I wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what?" Maya asked. "For my behavior at the restaurant? It was inexcusable," he paused and admitted. "I was also told that a promising art history student at City College had recently received our Phoenix Legacy Scholarship. I believe that was you, Maya Rodriguez." Maya's spine stiffened. "So it was you." "My foundation makes many anonymous donations. We hear of people in need and we help. It's what we do." "Why me, Mr. Petro?" Maya asked, her eyes narrowing. "What is it that you want?" Adrian found himself abandoning his carefully prepared script. "I don't want anything," he said. "When you said that name in the restaurant, it belonged to someone I knew a long time ago. A partner, a friend. His name was Daniel." Maya's breath hitched. "What was his last name?" Adrian hesitated. "It was a long time ago. We had a falling out. I never knew what happened to him. It was a lie, but it was the only one he could offer." "I see," Maya said, though her expression suggested she saw more than he revealed. He decided to change tactics. "Your scholarship file was impressive, Miss Rodriguez. We're looking to expand our arts and culture division. We need people with passion. I could offer you an internship." The offer was staggering, but she knew it was a trap. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian looked away. "Let's just say that I have a debt to the past, and I believe in paying my debts." He handed her a card. Think about it. The offer stands. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya Rodriguez sitting on the bench, the world tilting on its axis. The ghost of her father no longer felt like a distant faded photograph. He was suddenly terrifyingly real, and his shadow was intertwined with that of the most powerful man she had ever met. The question was no longer if they were connected, but how. And what terrible secret was Adrian Petro so desperate to keep hidden? The name Adrian Petro had not always been Adrian Petro. 22 years ago in the Nant world of Siliconet, the offer stands. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya Rodriguez sitting on the bench, the world tilting on its axis. The ghost of her father no longer felt like a distant faded photograph. He was suddenly terrifyingly real, and his shadow was intertwined with that of the most powerful man she had ever met. The question was no longer if they were connected, but how. And what terrible secret was Adrian Petro so desperate to keep hidden? The name Adrian Petro had not always been Adrian Petro. 22 years ago in the Nant world of Silicon Valley startups, he had been Adrian Price, a whip-smart, ruthlessly ambitious MBA graduate with a talent for selling a vision. But the vision itself had belonged to his partner, Daniel Rodriguez. The discrepancy between the salesman and the creator had been a quiet source of tension in their small company, but their friendship had papered over the cracks. No one knew that history better than Frank Miller. Frank was a relic from a different era of journalism. His office was a cluttered mess of old newspapers, cold coffee cups, and the faint smell of cynicism. He was a Pulitzer Prize finalist from the late 90s who now ran a small independent investigative blog that specialized in taking down giants. He didn't have the resources of the big papers anymore, but he had a nose for lies and a memory like a steel trap. Years ago, Frank had been a young tech reporter covering the dot boom. He had interviewed the duo behind DA Innovations for a piece on promising startups. He remembered Daniel Rodriguez vividly, a brilliant, passionate engineer with eyes that lit up when he talked about his compression algorithm. And he remembered Adrian Price, the polished, articulate frontman. The article was never published. The startup folded abruptly after Daniel's tragic death. Frank had always felt a pang of regret about that. The technology had been revolutionary. For 2 decades, the story was a dead end. Then a few years ago, Frank was researching the meteoric rise of Ethelgard Innovations and its reclusive founder, Adrian Prov. He found the company's original incorporation papers, and a familiar name jumped out at him. The core technology patent, the very algorithm that was the bedrock of Petro's multi-billion-dollar empire, had originally been filed by a small defunct LLC, DA Innovations. The connection was tenuous. Petro had likely just bought the dormant patent for a pittance. It happened all the time. Still, Frank filed it away. His interest was reignited when an anonymous email landed in his inbox. It was from a disgruntled former board member of Ethelgard, forced out in a power play by Petro. The email was short and cryptic. You were right to be curious about the origins of Athlard. Petro isn't who he says he is. Look into his past. Look for a ghost named Daniel Rodriguez. That was all Frank needed. He began digging in earnest. He pulled old DMV records, university transcripts, anything he could find. He discovered that Adrian Petro didn't exist prior to 20 years ago. But Adrian Price, who matched his age and physical description, had disappeared at the exact same time right after liquidating DA Innovations' assets, including the patent for a negligible sum. He had legally changed his name, moved to the other side of the country, and re-emerged a year later as Adrian Petro, founder of a new company with a revolutionary piece of tech. The final piece of the puzzle was connecting it to the present. He ran a deep search on the name Rodriguez, cross-referenced with Petrov. He expected nothing, but then a hit, a gossip column tidbit about a strange incident at the Gilded Compass. Billionaire Adrian Petro causing a scene shouting at his staff. Frank made some calls to his sources on the restaurant scene. He got the waitress's name, Maya Rodriguez, Daniel Rodriguez's daughter. Frank felt the familiar, exhilarating thrill of the hunt. This wasn't just a story about a shrewd business deal anymore. This was a story about betrayal, identity theft, and a 20-year-old lie. He found Maya outside her college campus, a coffee and a textbook in her hands. He approached her cautiously, his demeanor that of a kindly rumpled professor rather than a predator. "Miss Maya Rodriguez," he began. She looked up wary. After her encounter with Petro, she was suspicious of all strangers. "Yes, can I help you? My name is Frank Miller. I'm an investigative journalist." He handed her a business card. "I'm working on a story about the early days of the tech industry, specifically about a brilliant inventor named Daniel Rodriguez. I believe he was your father." Maya froze the coffee cup, trembling in her hand. "My father? Why?" "I believe his work, his legacy may have been misrepresented," Frank said, choosing his words carefully. "I knew him briefly. I interviewed him once. He was working with a partner, a young man named Adrian Price." Mir's eyes widened. "Price, not Petrov, a different name." I don't know that name." "I'm not surprised." Frank said, his expression grim, because Adrian Price doesn't exist anymore. He changed his name 20 years ago to Adrian Petro. The textbook slipped from Mir's grasp and hit the pavement with a heavy thud. The world tilted again, but this time the pieces weren't just shifting. They were clicking into place with horrifying clarity. The scholarship, the paid medical bills, the job offer, the look of sheer terror on Petro's face in the restaurant. It wasn't just because she had said a name from his past. She had said her father's name, the name of the man he had erased. "What are you saying?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. "I'm saying," Frank said, his voice low and serious, "that Adrian Petro's entire empire is built on your father's invention. And I think he has been lying about it and about his own identity for a very long time. The question is, what else is he lying about?" Frank's last question hung in the air, sinister and heavy. Maya thought of the official story of her father's death. A simple car accident, no foul play, a story delivered to her grieving mother by the man who now called himself Adrian Petro. A cold, terrible dread, darker than any she had ever known, began to seep into her bones. The secret was no longer just about a stolen invention. It was now about a stolen life. The conversation with Frank Miller lit a fire in Mir. The grief she had carried her whole life, a soft, melancholic ache, was now forged into a sharp, cold anger. She wasn't just the daughter of a ghost anymore. She was his avenger. She declined Adrian's internship offer via a curt professional email, an act of defiance that felt both terrifying and empowering. She knew she couldn't rely solely on Frank Miller. This was her fight. She had to find her own proof, something undeniable that connected the man she knew as Petro to the father she barely remembered. Her mother, Maria, had kept a single box of Daniel's belongings in a dusty corner of a storage closet. It was mostly filled with sentimental items, old sweaters that had lost their scent, a handful of dog-eared paperbacks, a coffee mug with a chipped rim. But at the very bottom, beneath a stack of his college notebooks filled with complex equations Maya couldn't decipher, was a thin, leather-bound journal. She had never looked through it before. Her mother had said it was too painful. Now she opened it with trembling hands. Most of it was technical diagrams and formulas that meant nothing to her. But scattered between the code were personal entries written in her father's looping, energetic script. March 12th. Adrian is a marvel. He pitched the algorithm to Blackwood Capital today. He has a way of making them see the future. I just build it. He sells it. Perfect partnership. April the 6th. The pressure from Blackwood is immense. They want to move faster, cut corners. Adrian is handling it, but I can see the strain. He's more edgy, less talk about changing the world, more about quarterly projections. May 17th. Big fight with Adrian today. He wants to sign an amended contract with Blackwood that gives them a controlling interest and pushes me out of any governance role. He says it's the only way to get the final round of funding. It feels like he's selling my soul to them. He called me naive, said this is how the world works. Is he right? The last entry was dated 2 days before his death, June 5th. I can't shake this feeling. Something is wrong. Adrian is avoiding my calls. I found a clause in the new paperwork he wants me to sign. It effectively assigns sole ownership of the patent to him in the event of my incapacitation or departure from the company. He says it's a standard legal formality. It feels like a threat. I'm driving up the coast tomorrow to meet him at his rental to sort this out once and for all, face to face. Maya's blood ran cold, driving up the coast tomorrow to meet him. He had been driving to meet Adrian on the very day he died. The accident was no longer a random tragedy. It was now a terrifyingly convenient event for the man who stood to gain everything from it. She needed more. She remembered her mother mentioning that Adrian Price had handled everything after the funeral. He had come to their old house and collected all of her father's research, all his prototypes. He had claimed he was preserving Daniel's legacy. He had been erasing the evidence. Driven by a cold fury, Mia took a leave of absence from her studies and her job using the first of the Phoenix Legacy Scholarship Funds to hire a private data recovery specialist. She gave him the one piece of hardware she'd found in the box, an old brick-like external hard drive from the late 90s. Daniel had labeled it Project Sparrow Backup. While she waited, she met with Genevieve Dubois. She called Adrian's direct line, the number he had given her at the museum, and asked to speak with his executive assistant. Surprised, Genevieve agreed to meet her for coffee, likely assuming Maya was reconsidering the internship. They met in a neutral cafe, far from their respective worlds. "I appreciate you meeting me, Miss Dubois," Mia began, her voice steady. "Please call me Genevieve. I was sorry to hear you wouldn't be joining the foundation," the older woman said with polished warmth. "I can't work for him," Maya stated flatly. "But I have to ask you something. You've been with him for a long time. Do you know who he was before he was Adrian Petro?" Genevieve's professional smile faltered. She chose her words with extreme care. "Adrian values his privacy. His past is his own. His past is my father's past." Maya counted, her voice dropping. "My father, Daniel Rodriguez, his partner. The man whose work your entire company is based on." Genevieve visibly palled. The truth of Maier's words hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had suspected she had pieced together fragments, but she had never heard it stated so plainly, so boldly. She saw the pain and determination in May's eyes, and her carefully constructed loyalty to Adrian began to fracture. She thought of his constant torment, his sleepless nights, the way he flinched at loud noises. She had always attributed it to the pressures of his position. Now she saw it for what it was, the haunting of a guilty man. "What do you want, Maya?" Genevieve asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The truth," Maya said. "He was supposed to meet my father the day he died. I want to know what happened on that road." Genevieve looked away, her composure crumbling. "I can't. I don't know everything, but I know that whatever happened that day, it broke him. The man you see now was forged in that fire. He's never been free of it." She leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "Be careful. The truth you're looking for. It might be more terrible than you can imagine." The day the data specialist called, Maya was sitting in her apartment, her father's journal open in front of her. "Miss Rodriguez," the man said over the phone, "we got it. It took some doing, but we recovered most of the data from the drive. There are work files, correspondence, and one audio file. It's corrupted at the end, but the first few minutes are clear. It sounds like a recorded phone call. The file name is Blackwood Final Offer." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "Send it to me. Send it all to me now." Minutes later, a secure link appeared in her inbox. She downloaded the file, her hands shaking so badly she could barely click the mouse. She put on her headphones, closed her eyes, and pressed play. First, she heard the familiar crackling sound of a dial-up modem, a sound from another lifetime. Then a voice, young, arrogant, confident. It was Adrian Price. "Listen, the deal is the deal," Adrian's voice said. "He's not signing. He's getting sentimental. Thinks the work is more than just a product." Another voice, older Sarah, replied, "It must be someone from Blackwood Capital. We don't pay for sentiment, Price. We paid for a patent." "Is he going to be a problem?" There was a pause. Then Adrian's voice returned, lower, conspiratorial. "He's driving up to see me tomorrow. We're going to talk it out on the coast road. It's a nasty stretch of highway, especially if the weather turns. Things happen on that road. A man can get distracted. A car can swerve." The other voice was chillingly calm. "I trust you will acquire his signature one way or another, or ensure his departure from the company is permanent. Our investment must be protected." "Don't worry," Adrian said, and the sound made Mir's stomach turn. It was the sound of a man sealing a devil's bargain. I'll handle Daniel. The audio devolved into static. The end of the recording lost to time and decay. But it didn't matter. Maya ripped the headphones from her ears, a strangled Seb escaping her lips. It wasn't just theft. It wasn't just a lie. It was a conspiracy. Whether by direct action or malicious inaction, Adrian Petro was responsible for her father's death. He hadn't just stolen a legacy. He was a killer, and she was going to make him confess. The confrontation was not going to happen in a boardroom or a lawyer's office. It had to be on her terms. Maya called Adrian's private number, her voice a cold, steady instrument she didn't recognize as her own. "It's Maya Rodriguez," she said when he answered. "We need to talk, not about an internship, about my father." A heavy silence met her from the other end of the line. Then Adrian's voice, rough with resignation. "Where? The place you were supposed to meet him?" She said the words like stones in her mouth. Vista Point on the Old Coast Highway. Sunset. She hung up before he could reply. The drive up the coast was agonizing. Every turn in the winding road was a fresh stab of grief. This was where it happened. This was where her father's life had ended. The sky was a bruised purple and orange as the sun began to sink below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the asphalt. Vista Point was a deserted turnout overlooking a sheer cliff that dropped hundreds of feet to the churning gray Pacific below. A simple guardrail was the only thing separating the road from the abyss. Adrian was already there, standing by the rail, his back to the road. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of a bespoke suit. He looked older, smaller, dressed in a simple dark coat, a man stripped of his power, waiting for judgment. Maya got out of her car, the cold sea wind whipping her hair across her face. She walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound, the crash of waves against the rocks below, and the cry of a lone seagull. "This is where you were supposed to meet him," Maya said, her voice devoid of emotion. It was a statement, not a question. Adrian didn't turn. He just stared out at the endless water. "Yes, he never made it," she continued, her voice, gaining a hard edge. "He had a car accident just a few miles from here." "Lost control," the police said. "Funny how that happens." Adrian flinched, a barely perceptible tremor that ran through his body. He finally turned to face her. The mask was gone. His face was a wreck of guilt and exhaustion, his eyes haunted. "Maya, I don't." She cut him off, taking a step closer. "Don't you dare say you're sorry. I found his journal, Adrian. Or should I call you Adrian Price? I read about your fight, about the contract, about how he was coming here to confront you." She saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. He hadn't known the journal existed. "And then," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "I found this." She pulled out her phone and played the audio file. The sound of his own young, ruthless voice echoed in the sea between them. A nasty stretch of highway. "Things happen on that road. I'll handle Daniel." Adrian visibly crumbled. It was as if the sound of his own damnation had severed the last string holding him together. He staggered back against the guardrail, his face ashen, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You killed him," Maya said, the accusation raw and brutal. "Whether you ran him off the road yourself or you just let it happen, you killed him." Tears streamed down Adrian's face, the first tears he had shed in 20 years. "No," he choked out, his voice breaking. "I swear to you, I never touched him. I wouldn't have. I couldn't have." "Then what happened?" she demanded, her own tears now starting to fall hot and angry. "Tell me the truth. For once in your miserable, stolen life. Tell the truth." He sank to his knees on the cold gravel, his head in his hands, the billionaire titan reduced to a broken, weeping man. "We were going to meet here," he began, his voice choked with sobs. "I was going to try and convince him to sign. The investors, Blackwood, they were threatening to sue us into oblivion, to ruin us both if we didn't give them full control of the patent. I was scared. I was young and stupid and ambitious. I thought I could make him see that it was the only way." He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. "That phone call I was posturing, trying to sound tough for the investor. I never meant. I never thought." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "I was waiting here. He was late. Then the storm rolled in. worse than anyone predicted. The rain was coming down in sheets. I got a call. It was the highway patrol. There had been an accident down the road. A car matching Daniel's had gone through the guardrail further down the pass where it was weaker. They said he couldn't have survived the fall. He squeezed his eyes shut, the memory as vivid as if it were yesterday. And my very first god-awful thought was not grief. It was relief. The problem was solved. The patent was mine. The investors were happy. I was free. The confession was uglier than anything Mayer could have imagined. He hadn't been a murderer in action, but he had been one in his heart. He had wished her father gone, and the universe had complied. I went to your mother, he continued, his voice thick with shame. I lied. I played the part of the grieving friend. I took his research, his notes, and I ran. I changed my name, buried Adrian Price, and used Daniel's genius to build my world, telling myself every single day that I was honoring his legacy. But I wasn't. I was desecrating his memory. Every dollar I made, every building I put my name on, it's all been poisoned. I haven't had a single peaceful night's sleep in 20 years. He looked at Maya, his face a mask of utter self-loathing. I didn't kill your father, Maya. My greed and my ambition did. I let him die. I profited from his death. In the eyes of God, there is no difference. The wind howled around them, a mournful cry from the sea. Maya stood over him, the audio file on her phone, the journalist's evidence, the journal enough to destroy him utterly. She could send him to prison, not for murder, but for the corporate fraud, the conspiracy, the lies that had led to this moment. She could strip him of his empire and leave him with nothing. But as she looked at the broken man at her feet, she saw not a monster, but a pathetic, hollowed-out shell haunted by a ghost of his own making. Destroying him wouldn't bring her father back. It wouldn't erase the 20 years of struggle she and her mother had endured. A different kind of justice began to form in her mind. A justice her father, the brilliant, compassionate dreamer, might have wanted. Get up, she said, her voice hard as steel. Crying on your knees changes nothing. Your reckoning is just beginning. Adrian looked up, confused. What? What are you going to do? You're not going to jail, she said, and a flicker of hope crossed his face, which she immediately extinguished. That would be too easy. You're going to live with this, and you are going to pay, not with anonymous checks or guilty job offers. You are going to give my father back his name. The story of Adrian Petro didn't end with a dramatic courtroom battle or a scandalous headline. Though Frank Miller was furious when Mia refused to give him the final damning evidence, instead it ended with a press conference that shook the tech world to its core. Adrian Petro, flanked by his lawyer and a silent, poised Maya Rodriguez, publicly confessed. He told the world that the foundational technology of Ethogard Innovations was the sole creation of his late partner, Daniel Rodriguez. He announced the renaming of the company's immensely profitable R&D division to the Daniel Rodriguez Institute for Innovation. Furthermore, 50% of the company's shares were transferred into a trust controlled by Mir, not as a payout, but as rightful ownership. He didn't confess to the conspiracy, but in admitting the theft of his legacy, he admitted to the theft of his life. Adrian Petro kept his freedom, but lost his soul's prison. He was forced to live every day in the shadow of the man he betrayed his name, now forever. A footnote to Daniel Rodriguez's genius. For Maya, it wasn't about the money. It was about seeing her father's name in lights, his picture in textbooks, his genius finally acknowledged. She had reclaimed a stolen legacy, not for revenge, but for remembrance. Justice, she learned, isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about rebuilding what was broken and forcing the truth into the light, no matter how long it's been buried. If this story of a life-altering secret and the difficult path to justice moved you, please hit that like button to let us know. Share it with someone who loves a story that feels real. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale that uncovers the hidden truths behind the lives we think we know. What would you have done in Mayer's place? Let us know in the comments below.